to share his anatomical tips for animation in games and beyond. Please welcome Stuart Sumida.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to see me today. And it's a great honor to be here with you here in Bergen. One of the things that happens in events like this is that you get to see speakers like the one you just heard, our lead off, and a variety of other things. And what you don't necessarily see is what's behind the curtain, right? I have to tell you that the organizing and developmental team here has been absolutely superb, and it makes our job easy. And so I think they deserve a round of applause, okay? So Gabrielle just told you that I'm a paleontologist, and you're thinking, why am I here going to listen to a paleontologist? So I'm going to try and convince you that that's worthwhile, and I'm going to actually try and convince you that we actually have some similar goals, some similar strategies, and I'm going to introduce myself to you as I try and make that suggestion. So why would you listen to someone like me? I study animals like that, okay? And I say this everywhere I go, by the way, that's not a dinosaur. Not a dinosaur. It's in all of the plastic dinosaur toy kits, I know, but it's not a dinosaur. It's in the lineage that led to mammals like us. Actually, the fancy word, by the way, that we use in biology about lineages of related animals is called a clade. A clade. So an evolutionary tree is called a cladogram. And I'm really proud in the new Disney film coming out, Strange Worlds, coming out in 3 days. The name of the family is called the Clades. We're really proud of that. So in any case, what do paleontologists do? They go to game conferences, apparently. And so usually what you see on television is some person with a little brush going like this. Oh my gosh, we don't do that. That's for television and the movies. Okay, mostly we walk around and we look and look and look. 90% of paleontology is looking. Only about 5 to 10% is finding. Okay, and then it's still not like television. We still don't do the little brush thing. Has anybody ever broken a bone? Right, and what did they put on you when you broke that bone? Yeah, that's what we do. They're full of bones, and we cast it up and we bring it home. And we clean it up there because it's safer, right? And now, don't get me wrong, we get to work in some lovely, lovely places. That's my summer office. It's great. And there's art there. There's art. This is, the rocks are about 280 to 300 million years old, pre-dinosaurs. And the rock artwork is probably somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 years old. The accommodations are excellent. Right? I go past that very, very quickly, not because I'm afraid of you seeing me naked. I'm afraid of you seeing how much weight I've gained since I took that picture, okay? This is one of my favorite little bits of the southwestern United States, and I like to introduce what I do to folks like you with this image. This is a big rock formation where we found some fossils one year, and on the map we say, well, what's this rock formation called, this big outcrop? Because most of them have names, and the students I was working with were, they're saying, I can't find it on the map, I can't find it on the map. I said, well, look here's the map, and they're all like this. I have no coverage. And they have to remember maps? They unfold. And the student said to me, I can't find it on the map. Give it to me. And sure enough, it didn't have a name. So I said, you get to name it. And they named it Grandma Watching TV Rock. What a great name. And I got to say, it's Grandma's watching an old-fashioned box-style television, so, okay, I think Grandma's got a bun on her head. I think she has a sort of a big bum, right? I added to his interpretation, I think there's a cat sleeping on top of the warm television set. Now, why do I use this picture? Well, because it's about shape, isn't it? Now that you see that shape, you can't get that shape out of your mind. And I can tell you that at different times of the day, this looks different too. The color, the lighting, the textures look different depending on how it's lit. And suddenly, the kinds of things that I look at are similar to some of the things you have to make. So we have some interesting similarities. Now, I am a paleontologist. I dig up fossils. There's one of my favorite little fossils. Actually, I have it with me. I brought it with me to the conference. That's about the size of a dinner plate. And it was an unusual little fossil. I'll try and make the story quick. We found this fossil in central Germany, and if you look at it, it's got really long legs and really little arms. And our interpretation of it was that it was the earliest bipedal animal ever, predating bipedal dinosaurs by 60 million years. And the National Geographic actually sponsored us, so they're going to put us in the magazine. I'm like, yay! My grandma finally knows what I do. Okay? And I said, okay, they said, we need some description. Like, well, his body was so many centimeters, his legs were so many. No. National Geographic readers don't like math. And I said, well, its arms are half the length of its leg. They said, that's a ratio, fractions, that's math. I'm like, you're kidding, right? And they said, no. And I was a little irritated, and I said, look, it could scratch its nose with its toes, but it couldn't scratch its arse with its fingers. And they quoted me. Except they changed let's see if I can find it here. They changed it to butt. I'm like, are you kidding me? Lizards don't have butts. But, however, it finally came together when we had an artist illustrate it. Because art's important. Art's important. Now, the animal I first showed you was the one with the big spines. And I could go on and on and on about how those are constructed. And if you look at the spines that we find, they're not always perfectly straight like that picture I showed you. And people say, well, they were found in the ground. Okay, and so they're all sort of distorted. And we've sliced them up. And I could tell you all about why I don't think they look straight, but best for me to do is to show you a picture. Right? Because art helps. I am now the vice president of the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, the largest group of paleontologists in the world, and I would say fully 1/4 of our membership are artists. Because it's about communicating. And the reason I love coming to events like this is because we have to be communicators. Most scientists are terrible at telling their stories, and you all are storytellers. At some level, you're creating a story. And this is really important. This is a strategy that most scientists could learn from, by the way. I'm just saying. Now, of course, when you're a paleontologist, people say, well, dinosaurs, right? Like, I study things older than dinosaurs, but every paleontologist has to know about dinosaurs. So there's the world's most famous dinosaur. I got to spend yesterday with Gabrielle's daughter, and she told me very, very clearly that the most important dinosaur in the world was T-Rex. I'm like, fair enough. Okay. Ashoka explained this to me in no uncertain terms. Okay. So there's a skull of T-Rex. This is the most complete skull ever found. Okay. I can tell you that probably the most popular dinosaur in the world. Can you guess how many specimens of T-Rex have ever been found? Ever?
6.
Close. About 30. Closer than you think, though. How many more than 50% complete?
2.
So how do we know that much about it? Well, Jurassic Park, apparently. Okay? But I can tell you, and that's a segue into the idea that paleontology has been really important in media over the years. The first character animation ever was Gertie the dinosaur. Less than 25 years after Gertie, you had Fantasia. That's an enormous leap in technological ability. Okay? Less than, barely half a century after that, we made it from Fantasia to Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park. And of course now, we have dinosaurs in Jurassic world in video games and so on and so on and so on. And it's really funny. People say, oh, you're a paleontologist. I bet you hated Jurassic Park. Tell me everything that's wrong with Jurassic Park. I'm like, actually, there are quibbles, but we've been waiting to see that all our lives. Are you kidding me? I was very excited to see Jurassic Park. I love the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. It was the people I hated. They act nothing like paleontology. But Jurassic Park is not a paleontology movie. It's a monster movie with dinosaurs in it. So, yay, go dinosaurs, okay? Now, Ashoka told me that her favorite dinosaur is, in fact, T-Rex. And people say, well, what's your favorite dinosaur? Or what is your favorite dinosaur film? Not one that you might expect. So I'm going to show it to you because it tells you why I'm here, okay? So my favorite dinosaur film is this one. Some of you have never seen this film. This was done by a gentleman named Bob Kurtz, but I bet all of you have seen his work. How many people here saw the original Jurassic Park? Right? Remember Mr. DNA? Same animator. Yeah. Bob is really, really clever and really, really funny. So I'm going to let you watch his first dinosaur film, and then I'll recontinue.
Once upon a time, there was a dinosaur, a brontosaurus, a pterodactyl, and some weird-looking sea creatures and plants. Well, before long, the whole bunch became part of a layer of organic material. Then, with a little heat and pressure, they formed a pool of crude oil, which turned into 6 tanks of gas, 3 long hauls, a couple thousand kilowatts, and 4 cross-country hops. Now, we're plumb out of dinosaurs, pterodactyls, and the like, and it doesn't look like they're coming back. So don't waste them. The next time you jump in your car, remember, some prehistoric creature gave his or her all for that tank of gas. So go easy, and America's energy will go a lot further.
It's a very clever film. And Bob is a very important person to me in my life. Now, that film is over 40 years old. Yeah, they've been telling you the same thing for half a century. They just want your money. They don't care about green energy. They've been saying the same thing. They just want your money. But it's a great film. It's called The Chevron Dinosaurs. You can find them on YouTube, but there's actually a series of 4 of them. They're great. Bob is a very clever man, but I met Bob Kurtz when I was in graduate school, long ago in a galaxy far, far, far away, okay? And I had nothing to do with film or animation at the time, but a very, very good friend of mine introduced me to him. I said, you know the Chevron dinosaur guy? Are you kidding me? And he took me to meet Bob, and Bob actually gave me the first cell that I ever received as a gift. And I was like, wow, I love that film so much. And I saw all these beautiful drawings in his studio, and I said, who did those? He said, well, I did those. I'm like, really? Everything you have on screen looks like kitchen sponges and things like that. He says, no, what you have to understand is that we always practice. We do life drawing, we do research, and so on, because you always have to have reference. And I said, well, I study paleontology. Did you study dinosaurs when you did this film? He said, well, yeah, we had to. Caricature isn't funny if there's not something you recognize. He says, I don't care how cartoony it is, there's always reference, there's always research. I'm like, so you care about what people like me do? He's like, yeah, we have to. And I never forgot that moment to this day. Because that means that I get to talk to people like you. How cool is that? Now, I'm a paleontologist, but at university, I mostly teach human anatomy and physiology to nurses and doctors, and animal anatomy, comparative animal anatomy to biology students and veterinary students. And so you can study stuff like that, or stuff like that, or stuff like that. And the link becomes clear. When I teach animal anatomy, I teach not only how they're built, but how they move. You can take an image like this, and in the good old days, you might have called this keyframes or extremes. And we still do this, right? Everybody thinks there's a magic button, right? Oh, you're an animator. There's this magic button that makes animals run. No. Computer's a very, very, very expensive pencil. Okay? We get that. Okay? This particular set of keyframes was actually not done by an animator. It was done by a biologist. It was done by a gentleman at the University of California, Davis. And he became a biologist because his favorite film was Bambi. And he didn't think he could draw well enough to become an animator, so he became a biologist. Okay, not bad. And so there's Bambi. You probably recognize that scene, don't you? That's the scene of Bambi slipping on the ice. The entire movie was blocked out in skeletal form. The entire film. Before it went to animation, research and reference. And we still do this today. Here are some lovely illustrations by Mauricio Antón, who's based in Spain, and Jen Kim, who was the production designer on Strange Worlds, which is coming out in 3 days. Okay? And so what we do is we talk about how anatomical structure informs character creation and movement. And we get to do this in all sorts of contexts. And so what I've shown you so far are mostly old school drawings. The very first sort of strictly digital version we ever did was cats and dogs back in the day. And don't worry, I'm going to get to games in a moment. So here we have the bit on cats and dogs. Oops, sorry. Didn't get my video to run on that. And doesn't seem to be running. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. If we could get that to, it doesn't seem to want to go. Doesn't matter. That was a fun project because I was just chatting with some of your organizers here. Cats and Dogs was digital animation, cats, dogs, and martial arts. How fun was that? Okay. So when we did that, we researched cats and dogs and martial arts. How fun, okay? So fight scenes with animals, fabulous. All right, so research and development clearly are important. So what I'm gonna talk to you about with the time that we have remaining today are some of the most important strategies that we use whenever I go to a studio, whether it's visual effects, animation, or game studios. The things that artists want to hear from us most. Okay, and they are the following. Believe it or not, what you eat's really important. I'll explain that in a minute. Physics matters, as I'm sure many of you know. Okay, and I'm going to throw a few other things that I'd like you to remember. And then the age and sex of your character is very, very important. And then the tools we use to help convey those. And you'll notice that creatures are at the very end. I got to tell you, when I come to events like this and I see portfolios, usually, the first thing that someone shows me is some cloven-hoofed creature that's either so manly and massive or so female sexy that it's mind-boggling, and they usually have a sword that's so giant that they could never lift it, right? And I asked, the very first question I said is, how do they lift that sword, and how do they walk? And then if the answer is, I don't know, my answer is then to them, you need to go back and see how the parts work. Because when we create creatures, they're often built out of parts we already know. Now, I'm going to go a little bit quickly through this because each one of these topics could be a workshop in and of itself, but I just want to give you a flavor of the diversity of instruction that we give when we go either to visit schools or visit film studios. Okay? The first one is you are what you eat. What? If you're a quadrupedal mammal, at least, if you eat plants or meat, you move differently. And I know, how many vegetarians in the audience? Yes, and trust me, I'm not trying to offend any vegetarians, I promise you, okay? But here's the deal. Meat is actually really easy to digest. I know what you're sometimes told. It's not difficult to digest. I didn't say it's good for you, but it is really easy to digest. Plant material is virtually impossible to digest. It's mostly roughage. It's mostly nutritionally useless, so you have to eat a lot of it. So if you're a meat eater, you're slim and bendy. If you're a plant eater, you're built like a barrel because you have a huge amount of guts to process all that plant material, which means you're shaped differently. Plant eaters have really stiff backbones to hold up all those guts, so they move differently. Bendy-bodied meat eaters can bend their backs, and they run, therefore, in a different way. Stiff-bodied plant eaters are, as I just said, stiff and barrel-shaped, so they run differently. So what you eat determines not only shape, but the way you run. Locomotion, movement. Okay? It even goes down to the way your feet touch the ground when you run. When you're a flexy, slim, bendy-bodied carnivore, you do what's called a rotary gallop, which is hind, front, as if you're going around in a circle. But if you're a big, wide-bodied herbivore, you go right, left, so you don't tip over. Okay? And so what you eat determines even the way you run. It determines the way you run and how you see where you're going. Okay? That animal is a carnivore. It's chasing its prey. So its eyes face forward, which is different from an animal whose eyes are on the side of its head. If you have to track your prey in three-dimensional space, you need your eyes facing forward for depth perception. And of course, it's doing a rotary gallop. These animals have eyes on the side of their head because they have long snouts. Grass doesn't run away. You don't need to find it in three-dimensional space, okay? And if there's a predator, a carnivore, you don't care where they are. You just go the other way, okay? So if you watch this sequence, actually, the animator in this was Scott Johnston. He was the same guy who did the ballroom scene in Beauty and the Beast, and he was a CG supervisor for Iron Giant. Yes, Scott's amazing. Every one of these characters is doing a proper transverse gallop. Now remember, this is like, how old is Lion King? It's like almost 30 years old now. It's still a brilliant scene. Every one of those animals, except for Simba, is doing a transverse gallop, whereas Simba's doing a rotary gallop. So regardless of real versus cartoony, you can give the impression of the kind of animal it is just by the way it runs. Because you are what you eat. The position of your eyeballs, of your jaw joint, all have to do with what you eat. So if you know that one thing, you know a lot of stuff. You probably haven't studied wildebeest and cheetahs and all these other kinds of animals. But if you know one thing, you already know about 75% of what you need to know to make them go. So there, for example, the jaw joint. Jaw joints and meat eaters are in line with their teeth like a scissors. But if you eat a variable diet that includes plants, your jaw joint's out of line with your teeth, so you can grind. Okay? So there we have one of each. This is an illustration, by the way, of one of my favorite artists, Denise Shimabukuro, who makes the point. Denise can take anything I say, whether it's for an hour or a day, and she can reduce it to one single piece of A4 paper. She is a brilliant, brilliant artist. And so here is the very first project I ever got to work on because it had herbivores and carnivores in it. Okay? Now, I know this is before some of you were born, and yes, just like that picture of me in the bathtub, it makes me feel a little bit old. But I've got other pictures that make me feel even older in just a second, okay? So here are Denise's notes from the very first lecture I ever gave at the Disney Company, and there is a cleaned-up version that we actually published in a book called The 5 Most Important Anatomical Rules for Animators. The rules apply, even for animals you might never have studied. For example, hyenas are a little different from big cats and big dogs, but they're carnivores, so they have a rotary gallop. They have their eyes facing forward, their jaw joints in line with their teeth. Okay? Even though they have some modifications for being partially scavengers, they're not complete scavengers, but partially, we already know a lot of what we need to know, which saves time. And if you just heard in the talk before you, time is money. right? I'm sure that the directors and producers will tell you that. So even though those animals are cartoony, okay, they follow certain rules, okay? Whether real or photorealistic. Okay? When we worked on this film, I was very, very fortunate to get to work on this film in a variety of capacities. I said, Stuart, how would a tiger move in a boat for 100 days? I'm like, I don't know, but I know how they're built, and I know what it should look like. And that's where we started, okay? So whether real or cartoony, they say, oh, I need a fat guy and a skinny guy. I said, oh, you need an herbivore and a carnivore. No, we need a fat guy and a skinny guy like Abbott and Costello, like Laurel and Hardy. I'm like, you need an herbivore and a carnivore. So we come at it from different directions, but we come to similar conclusions. Now, there are tons of resources out there that people like myself use. So and here's one of my favorites, and I love to tell people about this because it's a resource that you can use and it's free. Free is a great price, okay? This is something from an outfit called digimorph.org. If you are building a character and you have to know how its head is shaped, you can get the skull, the digital data of scans of almost every mammal, reptile, bird, and fish on the planet for free. You can download these digital data for free. You want a tiger skull? You can download the data and print one out if you've got a 3D printer. Sweet. Why do I show you this? Well, because we use these data all the time. I got to work on this film. They said, we're going to have a bear in the film. I'm like, oh, what kind of bear? They go, Pixar bear. I said, what species? Like grizzly bear or polar bear or brown bear? Pixar bear. I said, well, what's a Pixar bear? This has got to look like a bear, but it can't look like any bear that's ever lived. It's got to be its own species. So you go back to first principles, you look at the skulls of all the bears you know, and you come up with a mashup of each. So real life even works on things that aren't real. And as I like to say, there's always a horse. Now, in video games, the most commonly animated characters are people, creatures, and people. But in animation and visual effects, it's all over the map. It's mostly people, cats, dogs, horses, and rodents. And there's always a horse. Even if the horse isn't a major character, there's always somebody riding one. And in fact, when my son, who's an inveterate game player, first started playing Assassin's Creed, I'm like, oh, freeze that. I need to see how the horse runs. Just saying. Now, so what you eat matters for character, movement, and design. Size matters because those rules apply to most animals and probably most dinosaurs, but not if you're really big or really small. Really small things are really bendy and they don't break easily. Convenient. Really big things are too big to do certain things. If you're as big as an elephant or a sauropod dinosaur, you can't run. Sorry. And I know, okay, the one part of Jurassic Park that didn't work for me, T-Rex could not have run 40 miles an hour, sorry. No, in fact, there's a gentleman named John Hutchinson who has done the mathematics and figured out that T-Rex could probably run 10 miles an hour at most, 15 kilometers an hour at most. Burst speed, maybe a little faster, which means at least someone in the room or the group has to be slower than you. Okay. Now, more importantly, is that size matters because physics matters. Many of you have to create scenes where the physics feels right. It's really important when we do fight scenes, for example. Okay? And so here's some very old school physics that I think is a useful example of this. So here we have Mickey as the brave little tailor, okay? And he kills the flies, right? Well, bam! Okay? Now, Mickey is a pretty small guy. Fast forward in this film to the giant. He's going to try and do the same thing. Same motion, right? So I'm going to skip over this. And now take a look at Mickey, okay? Watch the red lines. He's going to go through almost 180 degrees worth of motion in 4 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4. And he covers about the same amount of territory, the same distance in each of those frames, doesn't he? Now let's take a look at the giant. These are actual frames. Watch the red line. 1 frame, frame 3, frame 5, frame 7, frame 9. He's only gone 90 degrees in 9 of 10 frames. Why? Because size matters. Inertia. Mickey is small and light, so he can accelerate his arms very quickly. The giant cannot, because size matters. We have to take that into account when we do our animation, because that's how organisms work. Okay? Now, the trick is, of course, that beginning of that looks like it's in slow motion as he builds up speed. The fake for it is to make things move in slow motion. I love these corneal effects. They're great in their own way, all right? So we just go in slow motion. Arrgh! You don't notice it's actually a guy. If you look in the back, he's actually on his knees, but they sort of hide that from you. Because size matters. Now, do we want to make it realistic all the time? No, not always. But I'm going to show you some examples from some game work where it really does matter in just a moment. But we play with this, right? So a real animal that's big, like an elephant, they can't even run. They just walk fast, okay? Now, many, many years ago, we worked on a film called George of the... How many people remember young Brendan Fraser in George of the Jungle, right? And in George of the Jungle, he has a pet, Shep, the elephant, right? Shep thinks he's a dog. So we had to study elephant anatomy and make him run like a dog. And it's funny, because it's not real, right? So I'm not saying you have to do documentaries. No elephant could ever do that. They'd break. They'd explode like a watermelon. Okay? But to do the funny, you have to know the real first, right? So what you eat matters. Size matters. Age matters. This is one of my favorite pictures ever. Can you imagine a 2-meter tall creature coming down the street like that at you? It would be terrifying. It's more terrifying than Hello Kitty. I mean, because baby proportions are different, okay? Babies have big heads, stubby limbs. Why? Well, it's because the brain is big at birth and it has to be in place to help us develop. There's all sorts of biological reasons for it. But the bottom line is this. The head and torso and eye position is different in youngsters, and that's what makes them cute. But that also means they'll move differently because shape determines movement. This is another one of Denise's lovely drawings, by the way. And here she has cleaned it up. One of the things you'll notice about youngsters, they have really short faces. It's not so much that they have short faces, they have big heads, and the face catches up later. And so we use those features to make things look young, to make them look sympathetic, to make them look cute, and we just want to hold them like our babies. Okay? Children are cartoon characters. That's my son. Many, many years ago. Look at the size of those feet. He's very proudly wearing his Nemo outfit, okay? But look at the proportions, actually. Unaltered. He hates it when I show that picture, by the way. He's 21 years old now. Now, there's a friend with his daughter, and you probably know what we call children of this age, right? We call them toddlers. And the reason is because they've got these huge long torsos and these stubby little limbs. And so they wind up walking like this because size matters. When your torso's that long, you can't walk the way we do and use all those features of adult anatomy, which And that's an entire workshop in and of itself is human locomotion. Okay? But size matters, size proportions matter, and age matters. Who do you think's the world's most famous toddler? When I show you, I bet you'll agree. Huh? Why do you buy so much Winnie the Pooh stuff at the Disney store? Because he reminds us of our babies. Okay? Winnie the Pooh merchandise is the highest selling merchandise in Disney store history because he reminds us of our babies. They haven't made a Pooh picture in years, but it still sells because it reminds us of our babies. In fact, Piglet you notice what kind of clothing Piglet's wearing? He's wearing a onesie, actually. Baby clothes. Yeah, very clever, very clever. Now, those proportions are powerful. Okay? Anybody here who has children or hangs out with children, has nieces and nephews, some of these feelings are going to start, they're going to make that hormone start to flow in your body, okay? So here we have a young Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon versus his teenage age and his adult age that we see in the very last film. Okay? DreamWorks actually put together a really clever tool. It's a slider that we can change his age just so that the artist could figure out exactly what the proportions of his face would be in any different particular shot. So there he is from baby all the way to adult. Now, if you take those proportions and take a look at the size and shape of the head, the position of the eyeballs, which really has to do with the shortness of the face, you can see the really fundamental difference between a baby and an adult. Babies are somewhere between 4 and 5 heads tall, whereas adult males are about 8 heads tall and adult females between 7 to 7.5 heads tall. But those proportions are only very basic as well. So remember the kid that I just showed you, my boy? Okay, here he is again at 1 year old. Okay, and there he is at Industrial Light and Magic hanging out with Han Solo and Carbonite. Okay, same kid. Look at the baby's head. Look at how tall his head is compared to his face. Compare him to Han Solo. Huh? Because age matters. Okay? And so there's another of Denise's drawings. And so what you eat matters if you're an animal. Okay? Size matters no matter what you are. Age matters pretty much no matter what you are. And when it comes to human anatomy, okay, sex matters. Now, I'm a biologist, so I use the term sex. I'm not talking about the act. I'm talking about male or female X versus Y chromosomes, okay? And this is without any disrespect to the trans community. I'm simply talking about body proportion differences, okay? This picture used to be funny, and it's not anymore because I'm so old. And does anybody recognize who this is? One person. Yeah, it's John Cleese, the comedian. And I say to my students, you remember Monty Python? And they look at me like, I say, Faulty Towers? I say, Fish Called Wanda? And they're like, oh yeah, my parents had that on VHS. I'm like, now you have to say Nearly Headless Nick from Harry Potter. Oh, that guy. He had a bit part, right? Oh, yeah. But what he's doing is very clever. Of course, he's wearing heels, makes his legs look a little longer. He's wearing a very shapeless outfit. You can't actually see where his waist is. He's distracting you from the fact that he doesn't have mammary glands. He's got a big hat on, so he's distracting you from the construction of his head and face as well. So in fact, this is a very clever outfit. And my female colleagues tell me, by the way, his accessories, old though they are actually still quite expensive. I go, okay, I'm a guy, I don't know. I do have a purse, but it's like really, really old. Now, that particular individual is a man in woman's clothing. And I was introduced to you by Gabrielle from the UK. Apparently, this doesn't freak out men in the UK. They love dressing up as women. apparently. It's like a party thing with them. It's really, really funny. I didn't know until I was invited to one, and I was the only guy who wasn't wearing women's clothing. I'm like, what's going on? That was a Vicar and Tart party. What's that? You can talk about that at lunch. I see a few people in the UK going, yeah. Now, I'm about to show you the most terrifying picture of the entire morning. Okay? This is a woman at 9 months full-term pregnancy. Oh my gosh. Not mean to scare you. Gentlemen, this is the part where you say, I am so lucky. Okay? Repeat after me. I am so lucky. Okay. So just to let you know, there's the baby's head. There's this woman's bladder. Oh my gosh. All of her guts have been pushed up under her rib cage. Oh, what does this have to do with animation and games? Okay. Well, here's the thing. Oh, and by the way, never say to a pregnant woman, why do you have to go to the bathroom so much? Because I'm from America, and where there's lots of guns, and she could shoot you, and no one would blame her for anything, right? Sorry, I have to make America jokes. Okay. The reason this is important is because female hips are shaped like babies' heads, so they can get out. Okay? Students hate it when I tell them this. If you look at a female hip, it's an obtuse angle. Oh, remember math? Yeah, to do games and animation, you got to know math, right? Yeah, you do. Males, they don't have to get anything through there. Just a couple of tubes. They don't even use them all the time. Okay? So women have wide hips. Men have narrow hips. That means that the pivot joint on your rig is at a different spot depending on whether you're male or female. Women have long legs. If we were doing a workshop, I'd grab some people from the audience and demonstrate right now. But here's the thing, and this is another embarrassing picture because this is long ago and far away and a much, much younger version of me. But there I am. That's what I used to look like. Okay? And here I am with a couple students. Notice the body proportions? Women have long legs and short torsos. This is not a loaded deck here. Men have long torsos and relatively shorter limbs. This is Kathleen Yellen. She's now a surgical nurse. This is Hazel Whitworth. She now works for the FBI. Hazel's shorter than me, and her legs are longer than mine. Because that's how women are built. And if you don't believe me, look at these are some friends of mine from the University of Sheffield. Look at the proportional differences. These two people are exactly the same height. They're both wearing the exact same model of Dark Mountain shoes. Men have stubby limbs and large torsos. Women have long legs and short torsos. Which means we have to do that with the character when we build them. Here's some more of Denise's drawings. And we, of course, use the extremes of this when we choose to build our characters. Okay? This is Little Creek from the film Spirit, done by Press Romanos, one of my favorite animators, and unfortunately he's passed away. Okay? He always built a skeleton to understand the character as he got ready to animate. Here's another character he worked on, Shan Yu, which for my money is one of the spookiest Disney villains ever. Many Disney characters and villains are sort of comic. Like Cruella de Vil is creepy, right? But she's also sort of comic. He's nothing but mean. But look at his body proportions. He is hyper male. He looks like Drax the Destroyer because he's an extreme. Right? Now, that is an example of how we use male and female proportions. Mistakes have been made. Right? Mistakes have been made. I'm sure many of you have seen these, right? They're very popular. They're not cheap. Let's take a look at those. That's a guy with breasts. He's not built like a female. I'm just saying. So remember when we were in middle school and high school and they told us you got to do that whole critical thinking thing? We still do. Not everything is correct. Not everything on the internet is correct. Not everything that's expensive is correct, okay? So just to give you a little bit of a reality check, and I gotta say, and you're gonna hear from Richard tomorrow. I told everybody, I got the great opportunity to work on Horizon Zero Dawn, and I told them I will speak at Konsoll under one condition, that I don't go after Richard, because then everything I say will look uncool because the stuff he has to show you is so cool, okay? But I had the very, very good fortune to work with him and his crew on this particular film, and I've got to say that I was super pleased when we saw how Aloy was built, because Aloy is built like a real female. Yay. I would argue that she's probably one of the best female characters we've had in video games or movies since Tomb Raider, actually. So we have a character who's got proper proportions. That means she's going to move slightly differently from a male. Okay? When a male turns, they turn with their shoulders. When a female turns, they turn with their hips. Okay? When a female fights, I tell them, kick them. And a man fights, I say, punch him. Because you use what's stronger. And if your legs are longer, that's how you keep someone away from you. Now, she's got to pull a bow and arrow, okay? So she's going to do it slightly differently from a man who's heavier up top. And I got to say, give credit where credit's due, I thought they did a superb job on her in both Horizon games. So, now, we'll talk more about Horizon in just a bit. There are other games where we have similar strategies, and of course, they're extremes. This is an extreme, obviously. And then what do we do to make women with long legs look even more female? We put them in high heels. It makes their legs look even longer. Okay? So if we take a look at the body proportions of these characters, okay, look at how long the torso of the male is compared to the torso of the female relative to the legs. Okay? I'm really lucky that I get to work with both game studios and film studios. On rare occasions, I get the tremendous opportunity to work on a character that's in both. So here's a character that's hyper male. Now, when I was first working with Rocksteady, they said, oh, by the way, we got this game where we got to stick a shark head on top of a human body. I'm like, okay. He's going to just look like a guy. But at least they put the gill slits in there, right? Yeah. But what I'd like you to notice is look at his body proportions compared to Harley Quinn. Okay. She has long legs. She doesn't actually work, to give credit where credit's due, again, at least they don't have her running around in high heels. She wears boots at least, okay? Now, you might think this is an example of us having violated the rule. Judy Hopps looks like she's got really stubby legs. This is from Zootopia. Zootopia was super, super fun to work on because it had all animals in it. And then when they told me what they were going to look like, I'm like, why do you need me? They're going to walk around like people. I said, well, faces and fur. Oh, okay. But the proportions, interestingly, seemed off. Now, if you compare that character with Gazelle, who was voiced by Shakira looks a little more like, look at the length of her torso compared to the director, Byron Howard. And you can look at the torso of Gazelle and say, oh, okay, a little better on this one. But if you take a look at Judy Hopps, really, you put her next to her buddy, then, oh, yeah, she looks like she has short legs, but compared to him, she still looks more female. So we're messing with you a little bit. Now it goes for skulls as well. And if you're not sure if you're male or female right now, we're going to find out. Okay? So I want everybody to put their finger right at the top of their nose and run their finger up. You have to take your glasses off if you're doing it. And if you're a guy, you're going to run into this bump. Whereas if you're a female, it's going to be a smooth line right all the way to the top to your hairline. Because guys have what my female colleagues refer to as the retention of the Neanderthal-like brow ridge. Okay? It's because we develop longer and later. Who matures first, right? Young girls. They hit puberty earlier, so they stop laying down bone. The cranial capacity is the same size, but they don't put all the bumps aren't as robust. Here's another one of Denise's lovely drawings. Look, the angle of the jaw is more robust in a male. The brow ridge is more robust in a male. And we see that in character design. And we see it in character design all the time. Okay. Now, sometimes we violate the rule a little bit. There's Pocahontas as illustrated by Glenn Keane. And it's almost a straight line. So that's very, very female, but a bit of a robust angle in the lower jaw there. And people often criticize Disney heroines. They got no noses. Like, well, yeah, they do. It's just that they have no brow ridge, so there's no shadow. No shadow. See, no shadow. Same animator, no shadow. Now, you'll notice how shallow the angle of the jaw is on Ariel versus Pocahontas. Well, Pocahontas is a Native American. They probably use their jaws as tools to hold on to rope and thread and things like that. So, and I could be faking all of this, right? I could be making all of this. This could be like a book report, right? But I can tell you that we did work on this film. Now, I grind my teeth at night. My jaws are huge, and my teeth are really little. I've got a really angular jaw. It's like a horse's. And so, just to prove to you that I actually worked on this film, so there's the inscription from Glenn to Stuart. Thanks for the great lecture and the inspiring jawline. That's right. I'm Pocahontas. Now, and I said to him, really? I couldn't be like Tarzan? He goes, no, Tarzan's hair is cooler than yours. I'm like, so, and we use this on you all the time. So, angular jaw, shallow forehead, angular forehead. I didn't know that female lions don't have whiskers. That's new as a biologist. They have eyeliner. Okay, fine. Yeah. And by the way, age matters, doesn't it? Right? I know I've only got a few minutes, so I need to hurry. So there we have the baby with the big head and the short face versus Rafiki, old, wise, long face, shallow head. So we're using this stuff on you all the time. Now, skeletons matter because they are the most useful tool for riggers. This is work by James Baxter. James is freaking amazing. James actually animated this live. I'm like, you're making this all look bad, man. Okay. We build skeletons into characters all the time just so we can you never even see these things, but they help us figure out how things move. This helped Alex Cooperschmidt figure out how to retract Stitch's arms. In one little scene, he still did all this work. When we have to figure out something like that's a sphere and how to rig it, we build a skeleton first. Skeletons matter. I could talk about as a paleontologist, I could talk about skeletons all day, but we need to move on. Right. Finally, to creatures. In animation and visual effects, these are the most commonly animated characters. But in video games, it's mostly people and creatures. But here's the deal. When you do a creature, it's mostly built out of parts we already know. Not always, but often. Often. The mermaid is you would say she's a fish and a human. She's actually a marine mammal because fishes' tails go like that and marine mammals' tails go like that. How do we know what dinosaurs looked like? Well, we use living analogs. Even paleontologists like me use reference. And so when we build a character, I actually got to work on this movie. It was super, super fun. Hey, he doesn't look like a shark, but his mouth sort of does. Thank goodness we had Sylvester Stallone voicing him because he doesn't move his lips when he talks anyway. But that is a great white shark, and there's King Shark. This tradition goes way, way back. When Glenn Keane builds an animal, he builds its skeleton first. We do digital animals, we use inspiration. How to Train Your Dragon, I actually got a call from DreamWorks saying, Stuart, do you know anything about the anatomy of dragons? I'm like, no. I've never dissected one. I've dissected lots of things, but never a dragon. But I tell you what, I've studied dinosaurs, I've studied pterodactyls, I've studied bats, I've studied birds, and so that's what we use. And whenever someone asks me, what's the toughest thing to do? Flying things. Flying things are really hard. Okay? Same kid. He hates it when I do this. Okay? So we use reference all the time. All the time. Even in ways you might not expect. So for example, we got the flight pretty good. I gotta say, with all due respect, they fly pretty well. And people always say, well, what about Game of Thrones? Aren't they great? I'm like, they're all right. But they all take off wrong. Teaser. We'll talk about it at lunch. Okay? But they weren't walking well. And Simon Otto, who's the supervising animator on Dragons, like, no, we got to get this right. And so we went back to first principles. I said, well, this thing's built like a T-Rex, and here's how a T-Rex walks. And when we figured out the muscles that are key in making a T-Rex walk, we redesigned the tail and the legs, and it looked better. Because reference matters. Okay? Whatever reference you're using, it matters. Okay? Of course, the coolest T-Rex ever, probably, I guess I gotta say, right? Okay? And Richard will be here to talk to you about that tomorrow. 10 o'clock, I'll be in the audience with you. Okay? Now, its knees are somewhat more bent than a typical T-Rex, but God, I gotta tell you, it looks a lot like a T-Rex, doesn't it? And here's the great thing about robots, we don't even have to worry about the meat. One of the things that's really important is knowing how deep the joints actually are. People frequently get that wrong. But when we build robotic things, we don't have to worry about the meat so much. And by the way, that area up in there is Monument Valley, where I find those fossils I showed you on the very first slide. How happy was I when they asked me if I would come and work on this? I'm like, yeah! Can you tell that I have a really fun job? Okay. I got to tell you, one of my favorite characters in these games is not a dinosaur. Okay. That's one of my favorites. I even have the Lego for that one. Okay. But every character you see there has reference material that these artists used. And I had the great fortune to get to work with the folks on at Gorilla on the first Horizon game, and I was just, it was like geek heaven. Talking about robots and paleontology, dinosaurs and animation and games. How great was that? Okay? The references are really clear for me. And it's like, it's literally a privilege for me to get to show people in your industry the reference that I love. Here's one of my favorites. The saber-toothed cat is the state fossil of the state of California where I live. How sweet is that? Right? Now, there are other non-robotic characters, and for those, we do have to take soft tissue into account. Okay? That animal's forelimbs is more like your hind limb, and it moves more like a crab. Okay? Sorry, not this one. This one moves more like a dinosaur. This one moves more like a crab. Okay? Which means we have to figure out the footfall patterns of a crab. So, I've run out of time. Why do you want to come and listen to a college professor? Why are we here? Because Bergen's a pretty cool place, right? Here's why I'm here. For me, it's a great privilege to bring the science to the artists. You all work on computers. You're all scientists already. And those of you who are students and are aspiring to join this business, here's why I'm here. That is a caricature of my son. Same kid. That was drawn on September 12th, 2001, the day after 9/11. We were at a film studio. The world changed. And I said, what kind of world have I brought my son into? Where is that kid going to grow up? This is his little brother. He loves dinosaurs. And they kept growing and growing. I gotta tell you, my older son, dang, he looks like Keanu Reeves now. He sort of looks like John Wick, okay? Here's the deal. Both of them are inveterate gamers. They play everything you build. You are building the world in which they live in. And we heard this from the mayor first thing this morning. Across the pandemic, this is how the world stayed together. And this is how the world's going to grow. My generation is leaving a huge mess for you and my children. You are going to build the world in which they live, and you are going to develop tools that may help save the world from the stupidity of climate change, the kind of people who don't understand science and evolution. I deputize all of you to help me in that regard, okay? If you're building the world in which my kids grow up, that's really important to me. And I will do everything I can to help you do that. Because remember what Peter Parker's uncle said, right? With great power. And you have great power. And I'm really, really privileged to help you do that. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Stuart. We are running into lunch, but I think we have to take a couple of questions. So if anyone would like to come down the mic, but Stuart will be around.
Yeah, I'll be around at lunch.
If anyone
be happy to
speak.
chat. So
it's interesting to talk. The last time, it's been a while since I saw Stuart. It was about 5.5 years ago, and I was 7 months pregnant the last time in one of Stuart's workshops. And so he brought the pregnancy into the workshop and told me what my organs were doing inside. I kind of understood a lot, but I didn't view the rest of the pregnancy quite the same.
Well, thank you for having me. A question, yes, please go ahead.
Hi. This is sort of a random question that I just thought of. Are you aware of what's wrong with the horses in Skyrim?
Okay. My son loves Skyrim. And every time I tell him, stop, slow down, I want to watch, he's like, Dad, you're ruining the game for me. Okay? And so the answer is I've not had a chance to study them that closely. So,
if you're standing in front of a companion horse, it looks right at you.
Okay.
It looks straight at you.
Yeah, so in fact, with real horses, okay, a real horse would do this because its eyes are on the side of its head. Or it would shake its head up and down, and the degree to which you move would tell you how far away it is, okay? If you move your head and not much motion takes place, that means it's far away. But if you move your head and a lot of motion takes place, it means it's close to you, okay? That's why some animals do that. Horses barely have any 3D vision at all. It's like 5 to 10 degrees at most. But what's amazing about horses is that because they can move their ears, they can hear in 3D. So a horse will turn its ears and eye to you more than it will look you straight in the eye. Yeah. So yeah. See, now I'm going to have to go home and force him to let me watch that again. Even though he's completed the entire game, I'm going to make him bring it back up for me. So.
Yeah, the horses just point straight at you.
Yeah, and so the issue, and they're
So
like, there's always a horse. There, like for instance, in Assassin's Creed, there's a lot of horse riding. In the latest games in Japan, there's a lot of horse riding as well. Most of the gallops are pretty good, but the transitions between walking and gallop could use a little work. But those are quibbles. Yeah, go ahead.
What are your thoughts on games like Ark Survival Evolved, The Isle, and Primal Carnage when it goes to these dinosaurs and the way that they are predicted and shown?
The vast majority of those dinosaurs moved too quickly for what they could have really done in real life. Now, so if the physics of the planet you're on are such that the gravity's not so great, then fine. But most of them would break under the speed and motion at which they're moving. Now, I understand it's a game and that we're not making documentaries. So what I then look for is, are the joints at least balancing the characters correctly? One of the reasons I loved Horizon is because, like, for instance, the bigger animals don't move as quickly. Like the Seekers, they're quick, whereas the bigger ones, they take bigger, more deliberate steps. So at least what I like to see is if there's size differences, we see proportional differences in speed. If you give me that at least, then I'm a little less critical.
Fully in agreement.
Yeah.
The dinosaurs move way too fast in all of those games. And I've played all of them. They're great.
Yeah.
Made.
I think we just have time for one more, but we can take the questions.
I will
through to
stick
lunch,
around for
so.
other people who want to ask questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask regarding, skeletal proportions and skeleton movement, as well as muscular movement, where you know the limits and how to somewhat predict.
That's a great question. There's no way we can know exactly. There are people in my business who spend a lot of time looking at living analogs as well as the fossils. Now, if you look at a fossil, you can move the bone as much as you want, but it's restricted by the soft tissue around it. So the first thing we do is we rebuild the muscles. And then when we look at the length of the muscle, we can tell how long it can change in contraction. The length changes, and that gives us a bit of an idea for the excursion length of the limb. In general, if you look at a bone in a socket, the excursion is usually going to be 50% of that or less. Okay? And then it also depends on how close you are to the body. Different limbs, the farther or the way they are from the body, they're going to have slightly different ranges, and there are people who study those things as well. But the first trick is to, at least in a very, very basic way, reconstruct what you think the masses of the muscles are, and that helps you get the restriction on your, essentially your rig. So, but it's really important to put the rig in the correct spot. A lot of people think that the bones come right to the edge. They don't, okay? And therefore, the joints in your rig don't come to the edge. Between the rig or your skeleton, whichever you want to call it, is going to be meat, fat, skin, and possibly fur. And that means, and between the bones, like a shoulder blade, is not right up against your rib cage, like all the skeletons you had at school. There's meat in there, which means to get the shoulder or hips, for example, in the right spot, it helps to look at the meat as well. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, so I think we'll have to end the official questions and move to unofficial questions.
That would be great. I'd be happy to do so. So thank you again for coming out, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stuart.